Okay, folks, so for our last video of the semester, I always like to, in this class, before we get to the end, cover the Moonlight Sonata of Beethoven because it's, one of the most beloved pieces of classical music, and it's remarkable from a compositional and harmonic standpoint. So you probably know it. The beginning goes like this. And one of the things that makes this piece so haunting is this chord here, which we have yet to talk about. And this is called a Neapolitan 6th chord, or a Phrygian 6th chord, or sometimes just a flat 2 chord. And over on my little Failing for Harmony website, we explain this Neapolitan 6th. And it's one of the predominant chords, right? So we've talked about chords going from 4 to 5 to 1, going from 2 to 5 to 1, which happens a lot in the jazz idiom. You can have a 5-7 of 5 going to 1. You can have a diminished 7 of 5 going to 1. But this is a especially expressive chord, and it's called Neapolitan for reasons that go way back in classical music history. The sound of this chord was initially used in Italian opera, going back like to the 17th century, and it just got identified with a particular school of opera in the area around Naples, and this little label has stuck. So we can either think of it as a flat 2 major chord in the first inversion, but it's just stuck that we call it the Neapolitan, and it's still referred to that these days, so why not use that very charming term? Naples is also where pizza was invented, so that's really two great claims to fame. So the Neapolitan is really, really easy to understand. If we're in C minor, here's a 2 chord, which we will record. A 2 chord in minor is a diminished triad, and it will go to 5. It's often voiced in first inversion to avoid having a tritone between the D bass and the A flat, and it often just goes to a 5-7 and resolves to a 1 minor chord, and it sounds like this. So all you do to make this progression a little bit more poignant, a little more sorrowful, is by flatting the D, we end up with this sound. So we go from a little brighter to so melodically you're a half step above the note of resolution, a half step below, coming into the note of resolution. But harmonically, you end up by flatting this 2. If we were to do the thing we're asked to do to analyze harmony, if we were to stack this into thirds, we'd end up with a D flat, F, A flat chord. And in the key of C, that would be a D flat major chord or a flat 2 chord. Also, because you will recall that the Phrygian mode has that flat 2 that's in there, it'll sometimes often be known as a Phrygian 6th chord. Okay, and then typically it was voiced in first inversion, but then after a while it also would get voiced in root position, but it still tended to be called a Neapolitan 6th. So just to be clear, the 6 of this is simply the fact that it's in historically in first inversion. So the 6 refers to the inversion, just like the 2-6 refers to the inversion. Okay, so if we look now at the Beethoven, sonata. So what's going to happen is I'm going to work through this with you quickly, and then I'm going to ask you to go to here and see if you can add your own analysis of this based upon what you've seen in this opening. Okay, so I better zoom in a little more. Let's do it this way. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Okay, so here's our Neapolitan 6th here. We have to think in C sharp minor for this piece. So this would be C sharp would be the root, so C sharp minor would be the 1 chord. A major would be the 6th chord. Okay, G sharp major dominant would be the 5 chord. And so our lowered 2 chord would then be a D major chord. We take the second step of the scale, C sharp, D sharp. We raise it. In this case, we would naturalize. I'm sorry, we flat it. In this case, we naturalize it. We lower it by a step. So here's that sound again. So harmonically, we have 1 chord. The classic thing to do when you start a piece is have that 1 chord drop the bass. So you end up with a 1 chord with, I should have actually called it a 1-6-5, a 1 chord in 1-7 chord in the first inversion. You then go into that 6th chord, and then the Neapolitan is here. 5, and then this C sharp suspense. Okay. And then he just writes this haunting melody. And then notice we're now going to modulate. So the other reason I always use this piece as a great example for getting into a little bit more advanced harmony is because we start to work now with pivot chords. So we see what's happening here is the C sharp goes to F sharp minor, which is the 4 chord in C sharp, but it's also the 2 chord in E. So this is the way we pivot from C sharp minor to, in this case, the relative major, right, E major, and then we go 2, 5, 1 in E major, and he is modulated from C sharp minor to E major. So you hear how that brightens up. And then the reason this piece is so sort of haunting and sort of unsettled is we go from that major and we drop right into the parallel minor. And now so try to follow along here because it's brilliant what Beethoven does. So now we have a 5 of 6 in the key of E minor, which goes to C major, which is the 6 of E minor, right? But this is why this piece is so Neapolitan heavy, because then, so E minor, G7, 5 of 6 to 6, but then the 6th chord becomes the pivot chord. It is the, think about it, it's the Neapolitan of B minor, right? B minor would have a C sharp in the key signature. So to lower the second step of the scale, we'd make that a C natural. And then we, here then we start to analyze the rest of this little passage now in B minor. So we've already gone from C sharp major to E major to E minor to B minor, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're only 12 bars into this thing. Yeah? So part of the restless quality of this piece is it's constantly like not settling on a key area. So I'll go from the E minor. here. So now we're in B minor. And then again, Neapolitan 164, 5/7, B minor. And now B major. And then that killer note, that C is not a part of the B major harmony at all. It's again a lowered second, but it stands in this really expressive dissonance to the harmony. Whoops. So now we're in B major, but not for long, because the final thing we're going to do is modulate now to F sharp minor. And you can see just by way of a few diminished seventh chords, F sharp minor, and once again in F sharp minor, G major is the Neapolitan. 1, 5/7. Okay, so I'm gonna just take this out now. Okay, so I'm gonna play this again. Follow along. You've also got this. So now sort of try to hear the harmony as it's being played, and then we'll go on and a little more quickly talk about the rest of the piece. Now it carries on. And then we work our way modulating back to the dominant of C sharp. And now we continue with the sort of improvisational quality of this piece by he basically just sort of improvises over this dominant pedal. So you see all of this is just G sharp, and the right hand creates these beautiful sort of just haunting arpeggios, some of them diminished seventh arpeggios, not necessarily part that, over a G sharp. job is to figure out what happens in the reprise. So this is ABA form. We're back to the A. For one thing, he stays in A major. He doesn't change to E minor. Here's this one. You hear that Neapolitan, just to give that away. And now this dissonant note again. But now we're in this key. Now he puts the melody in the bass with a kind of a coda. Okay, so there's that piece. Thanks, everybody.